When Julie discovers her brother Ryan, the family's golden child, is running a massive real estate scam, she's torn between loyalty and justice. Unable to ignore the devastation he's caused to innocent families, she makes the gut-wrenching decision to report him to the FBI, setting off a chain reaction that spirals out of control. Ryan goes on the run, but the real shock comes when their parents are implicated in his crimes, accused of laundering his stolen millions. As Julie struggles with guilt, betrayal, and the fallout tearing her family apart, Ryan resurfaces with a chilling revelation that upends everything she thought she knew about her family, and herself. In this gripping tale of deception, betrayal, and moral dilemmas, Julie learns the devastating cost of doing the right thing, and how far people will go to protect themselves. Will justice prevail, or has Julie unleashed a storm that no one can escape? The room was quiet except for the hum of my laptop. I was seated at Ryan's mahogany desk, sorting through a pile of invoices he'd handed me with his signature charming smile. "Just some busy work," he'd said. "Nothing too complicated. I know you could use a little extra cash." He wasn't wrong. After losing my marketing job a few months earlier, I'd been scraping by on savings and part-time gigs. Helping Ryan seemed like the perfect solution, family helping family. My brother, Ryan, was the success story of the family. He started a real estate company fresh out of college, and within a few years, he was making more money than the rest of us combined. He had the designer suits, the luxury car, and a sprawling house that could have been plucked straight from a magazine. My parents couldn't stop bragging about him. "You should be more like Ryan," they'd say, not so subtly hinting that my life had been one disappointment after another. I hated the comparisons, but deep down, I admired him. He'd built a life most people could only dream of, and now, he was even throwing me a lifeline when I needed it. I had no reason to question him. At first. The invoices were straightforward: client names, property addresses, amounts paid. My job was to organize them into a neat spreadsheet, making it easier for his accountant to file taxes later. But as I worked, something started to nag at me. A couple of the client names struck me as unusual: John Doe, Jane Smith. I almost laughed at how generic they sounded. Maybe Ryan had a weird sense of humor when naming placeholder files. I flagged them, planning to ask him about it later, and moved on. But the oddities didn't stop there. Some of the addresses didn't seem to exist. When I tried looking them up online, I couldn't find any trace of them. No property listings, no tax records, nothing. It didn't make sense. Ryan had always been meticulous about his work. How could these details slip through the cracks? I brushed it off at first. It wasn't my business to second-guess him. Maybe there was some logical explanation I wasn't seeing. But the more I worked, the more red flags I noticed. Payments that didn't match up, duplicate invoices for the same property, contracts signed by people with suspiciously similar handwriting. By the time I finished for the day, my stomach was tied in knots. I sat back in the chair, staring at the glowing screen. Was it possible that Ryan, the golden boy of our family, was doing something illegal? The thought felt ridiculous. Ryan was ambitious, sure, but he wasn't a criminal. He couldn't be. Could he? That night, I couldn't sleep. The questions circled my mind like vultures, picking at my nerves. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next day, I went back to his office with a renewed sense of determination. If there was nothing to worry about, I'd prove it to myself and move on. Ryan wasn't there when I arrived, which worked in my favor. I had the office to myself and access to all his files. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but I knew I had to dig deeper. I started with the flagged invoices, cross-referencing them with public property records. That's when I hit the first bombshell. One of the houses he'd claimed to sell didn't even exist, it was just an empty plot of land. My hands began to shake as I kept searching. Another invoice led to a foreclosed home that hadn't been sold in years. Then another. And another. The pattern was undeniable. These weren't clerical errors. Ryan was fabricating sales, fake clients, fake properties, fake transactions. He was pulling money out of thin air, using it to pad his accounts. But how? And why? The answers came quickly as I opened more files. Ryan was taking out loans on behalf of these fake buyers, pocketing the money, and disappearing before anyone noticed. It was a scam, a massive, calculated scam. And it wasn't just a few $1,000s. By my rough estimate, he'd stolen hundreds of thousands, maybe more. My stomach churned as the realization sank in. This wasn't just about fake numbers on a spreadsheet. Real people were being hurt by this. Banks, yes, but also families. The homes he was using as part of his scheme weren't just empty shells, they were tied up in people's lives, people who'd worked hard to afford a place to live, only to find themselves caught in a financial web they didn't even know existed. I felt sick. My brother, my flesh and blood, was a thief. A conman. The golden boy was tarnished, and now, I had to decide what to do about it. That night, I confronted him. I didn't plan to, it just came pouring out the moment I saw him. He was lounging on the couch in his living room, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. I stood in the doorway, clutching the printed invoices in one hand, shaking so hard I thought I might drop them. "Ryan," I said, my voice cracking. "What the hell is this?" He glanced up, annoyed. "What are you talking about?" I threw the papers onto the coffee table. This. The fake invoices. The fake clients. The fake loans. Don't act like you don't know. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Julie, you don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." I snapped. "I've seen the records, Ryan. I know what you're doing." His face darkened, and the easygoing mask he always wore slipped away. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." "What I've gotten myself into?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're the one running an illegal scam. Do you have any idea how many people you're hurting?" Ryan leaned forward, his expression icy. "Listen to me, Julie. This isn't some black and white morality tale. This is business. You think I'm the only one doing this? Everyone in this industry bends the rules. I'm just smarter about it." "Smarter?" My voice was rising, but I didn't care. "Ryan, you're stealing. That's not bending the rules, it's breaking them. And when the authorities find out." "They won't," he cut me off. "Because you're not going to say a word." I froze. "You think I'd just keep quiet about this?" "You will if you know what's good for you," he said, his voice low and threatening. "I'm your brother, Julie. Family sticks together. And if you try to cross me, you'll regret it." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake him until he saw the damage he was causing. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the stranger my brother had become, wondering how I'd never noticed the cracks before. "Get out," he said finally, his tone flat and emotionless. "I don't need your help anymore." I left without another word, my mind racing. Ryan had made his position clear, he wasn't going to stop. And now, he expected me to be complicit. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. For the next few days, I agonized over what to do. Turning him in felt like betrayal, but staying silent felt worse. I thought about the families he'd stolen from, the people who'd lose everything because of his greed. They deserved justice, even if it meant tearing my family apart. In the end, I made my decision. I gathered as much evidence as I could, copies of the invoices, email correspondence, even screenshots of his bank transactions. My hands were shaking as I compiled everything into a folder. When I was done, I opened the FBI's website and typed up an anonymous tip. Before I hit send, I hesitated. This was it, the point of no return. If I went through with this, there was no taking it back. Ryan would be caught. Our family would be shattered. And I'd be the one holding the match. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and clicked the button. The waiting was the hardest part. Once I sent the tip to the FBI, it felt like my entire world froze. Every day, I woke up bracing myself for some kind of fallout, checking the news obsessively, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. What if I was wrong? What if Ryan somehow wriggled out of it and came after me? My chest tightened every time my phone buzzed or I heard a knock at the door. But for 2 weeks, there was nothing. Just silence. Ryan, oblivious, carried on as if nothing had happened. I avoided him like the plague, dodging his calls and ignoring texts from my parents, who were starting to notice the distance. My mom left me voicemails about family dinners and how I needed to stop being so antisocial. Little did she know I was grappling with the reality that her perfect son was a fraud, and that I had just thrown him to the wolves. Then, one Friday morning, everything unraveled. I was scrolling on my phone, half asleep, when a news alert popped up: local real estate mogul under investigation for mortgage fraud. My heart stopped. I clicked the link, and there it was, a picture of Ryan in his tailored suit, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur. The article said federal agents had raided his office that morning and seized computers and files. They were investigating claims of fraudulent loan applications tied to dozens of fake home sales. The dollar figure? Over $1.2 million. I dropped my phone. My stomach felt like it had been ripped out. It was one thing to report him, but seeing it plastered on every news site. It made everything real in a way I wasn't prepared for. My brother's name was everywhere, his picture shared and reshared on social media. The comments ranged from shock to outright hatred. People called him a thief, a con artist, a disgrace. And the worst part? He had no idea I was the one who turned him in. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. First it was my mom, then my dad, then some of our cousins. The family group chat exploded with confusion and disbelief. What's going on? This has to be a mistake. Ryan would never do something like this. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What could I possibly say? A couple hours later, my mom called again. I finally picked up, and the first thing I heard was her sobbing. "Julie, have you seen the news? They're saying all these horrible things about Ryan. He's not answering his phone. I don't understand, what's going on?" My throat tightened. "Mom, I don't know. I haven't talked to him." "Do you think it's true?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated, every muscle in my body screaming at me to lie. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. "I don't know, Mom," I said quietly. "But if the FBI is involved, there's probably evidence." She gasped like I'd slapped her. "Evidence? Are you saying Ryan?" No, there's no way. This has to be a misunderstanding. He would never hurt anyone. You know that." I stayed silent, my guilt clawing at my chest. She didn't know. She couldn't. Ryan had fooled everyone, and I was the only one who saw the truth. But saying it out loud would shatter her. When she realized I wasn't going to argue, she broke down again. "I have to call him. I have to get to the bottom of this." She hung up, leaving me sitting there in a cold sweat. I didn't have to wait long for Ryan to find out. That afternoon, he showed up at my apartment. I didn't even hear him knock, just the sound of his key in the lock. He had a spare, of course. "Julie," he barked as the door slammed behind him. I jumped up from the couch, my heart pounding. He looked like a wreck, his tie was loose, his hair disheveled, his face red with anger. He stormed into the living room, waving his phone at me. "Did you see this? Did you see what they're saying about me?" I forced myself to play dumb. "Yeah, I saw." "What happened?" "What happened?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Someone fed the feds a pack of lies, that's what happened. They came into my office, Julie. They took everything. My computers, my files, they're saying I've been committing fraud." I swallowed hard. "Ryan, if they're investigating, maybe they have." "Don't you dare," he snapped, cutting me off. "Don't you even suggest this is true. You know me. You know I would never do this." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But I'd seen the evidence with my own eyes. "Ryan, are you sure there isn't something you need to come clean about? Even if it's just a misunderstanding?" His eyes narrowed, and for a second, I thought he was going to hit me. "Are you serious right now? Do you actually think I'm capable of this?" I opened my mouth to answer, but he cut me off again. "This is exactly why I didn't want you involved," he spat. "You don't get it. You never did. You think the world runs on fairy tales and rainbows, but it doesn't. Sometimes you have to play the game to win. But no, you'd rather sit on your high horse and judge me." I flinched, his words hitting me like a slap. "I'm not judging you, Ryan. I'm trying to understand." "Well, don't bother," he said bitterly. "The FBI's after me, the media's dragging my name through the mud, and my own sister thinks I'm a criminal. Great. Just great." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard that the walls shook. I collapsed onto the couch, trembling. My brother, the man I'd grown up with, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, was unrecognizable. His charm, his confidence, his success, all of it felt like a lie. The next few days were a blur. The investigation made headlines every morning. News crews camped outside Ryan's house, hoping for a statement. Social media exploded with speculation and gossip. Some people defended him, calling the allegations baseless. But most people weren't so kind. His name became synonymous with greed and dishonesty, his carefully cultivated reputation crumbling before my eyes. My parents, meanwhile, were in denial. They kept insisting it was all a mistake, that Ryan was being targeted unfairly. My mom even suggested that one of his competitors might have framed him. "You know how cutthroat the real estate industry is," she said over the phone. "People will do anything to take down someone successful." I didn't have the heart to argue. What was I supposed to say? That I'd handed the FBI the evidence on a silver platter? That I was the reason her perfect son was being dragged through the mud? Ryan didn't contact me again, which was both a relief and a torment. Every time my phone rang, I braced myself, expecting his name to flash on the screen. But he stayed silent. I wasn't sure if that meant he'd moved on or if he was just plotting his next move. Then, one night, everything came crashing down. I was lying in bed, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, when I heard a loud banging at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. It was nearly midnight. Who the hell could it be? I grabbed my robe and tiptoed to the door, peering through the peephole. My blood ran cold. It was Ryan. And he didn't look angry anymore. He looked desperate. His eyes were wild, his face pale, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Julie," he called through the door. "I know you're in there. Open up." My hands shook as I unlocked the door and cracked it open. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He pushed the door open wider, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I need your help," he said, his voice breaking. "They're going to arrest me, Julie. I know it. I need to get out of here before it's too late." I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about?" You don't get it, he said, pacing back and forth. The FBI doesn't care about the truth. They just want someone to pin this on, and I'm an easy target. I have to disappear. Disappear? I repeated, my mind reeling. Ryan, you can't just run. That'll only make things worse. Worse than going to prison for something I didn't do, he shot back. I'm not asking, Julie. I need money, and I need it now. It hit me like a freight train. He wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. And suddenly, I realized just how far he was willing to go to save himself. I froze, staring at Ryan like he was a stranger. He was pacing my living room, running his hands through his hair, muttering to himself. The calm, composed man I used to know was gone, replaced by someone erratic and unhinged. Someone who looked cornered. Ryan, you need to slow down, I said carefully, trying to steady my voice. Running isn't the answer. You need a lawyer. Someone who can help you. Lawyer, he snapped, spinning to face me. Do you have any idea what kind of lawyer I'd need for something like this? I'm looking at years in prison, Julie. Years. A lawyer won't fix this. I need out. He was serious. Dead serious. And that's when it hit me, Ryan wasn't just scared. He was dangerous. He was a man on the edge, and if I didn't handle this carefully, I wasn't sure what he might do. I took a step back, keeping my hands up in a calming gesture. Okay, I said softly. Let's talk about this. What's your plan? Where would you even go? His eyes darted to the window as if someone might already be outside, watching. I don't know. Somewhere far away. Somewhere they can't find me. But I need cash to get started. And you're going to help me. My heart dropped. Ryan, I don't have that kind of money. Don't lie to me, he said, his voice sharp. You've got savings. I know you do. I've seen the way you live. You're not exactly splurging on luxuries, are you? I swallowed hard. He wasn't wrong, I did have some savings. Not much, but enough to get by after losing my job. But giving it to him? Helping him run from the law? It wasn't just wrong, it was reckless. I can't do that, I said firmly. You know I can't. His expression darkened, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of fear. You owe me, Julie, he said, stepping closer. After everything I've done for you. Who helped you when you couldn't pay your rent? Who gave you work when no one else would? Me. I've been there for you every step of the way. And now, when I need you the most, you're going to turn your back on me? My chest tightened. He wasn't wrong, I did owe him, at least in part. But this wasn't about repaying favors. This was about doing the right thing, no matter how much it hurt. Ryan, I love you, I said, my voice trembling. But I can't be part of this. I can't help you run. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. I knew it, he said bitterly. I knew you'd betray me, just like everyone else. You're just like them. Betray you? I repeated, stunned. Ryan, you betrayed yourself. You made these choices. You lied, you stole, and now you're blaming me for not cleaning up your mess. That's not fair. Fair, he spat. You think life is fair? You think I wanted to do this? I didn't have a choice, Julie. I had to survive. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've never had to fight for anything in your life. The accusation stung, but I refused to let him guilt me. That's not true, I said quietly. And you know it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was thick with tension, the kind that made it hard to breathe. Ryan's gaze bore into me, a mix of anger and desperation swirling in his eyes. And then, without warning, he turned and slammed his fist into the wall. I flinched at the sound, my heart racing. You don't get it, he muttered, shaking his head. You have no idea what I've been through. What I've had to do to keep everything afloat. Then tell me, I said, stepping closer. Help me understand. What happened, Ryan? Why did you start doing this? He let out a bitter laugh, running a hand down his face. You really want to know? Fine. I'll tell you. You think it's easy running a business? Everyone's out to screw you over, banks, competitors, even your own clients. I was drowning, Julie. I had debts you couldn't even imagine. If I didn't find a way to pay them off, everything would have fallen apart. So you decided to scam people? I asked, my voice shaking. You thought stealing was the answer. I didn't have a choice, he shouted, his voice cracking. You think I wanted to do this? I hated it. Every second of it. But it was the only way. And you know what? It worked. For a while, at least. His confession left me reeling. This wasn't the Ryan I'd grown up with, the one who used to sneak me candy when mom wasn't looking or help me with my math homework. This was someone else entirely, someone broken, desperate, and consumed by his own greed. And now look where it got you, I said softly. Was it worth it, Ryan? All the lies, all the damage you caused, was any of it worth this? He didn't answer. He just sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, he looked small. Vulnerable. Like the big brother I used to know. I don't know what to do, he whispered. I sat down across from him, my heart breaking. You need to turn yourself in, I said gently. His head shot up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Are you insane? Do you know what they'll do to me? They'll lock me up and throw away the key. Maybe, I admitted. But running isn't the answer. If you cooperate, maybe they'll go easier on you. Maybe you can fix some of this. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. You don't get it. You've never been in a situation like this. You don't know what it's like to feel trapped, to know there's no way out. You're right, I said. I don't know. But I do know that running will only make things worse. You can't fix this if you're on the run, Ryan. You need to face it. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood up, his shoulders slumping. You really think there's a way to fix this? I don't know, I said honestly. But you have to try. For a second, I thought he might listen. But then his face hardened, and I knew I'd lost him. I can't, he said quietly. I can't do it. Before I could respond, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the silence. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced with questions, fears, and regrets. Should I have tried harder to stop him? Should I have called someone, done something? But deep down, I knew Ryan was beyond my reach. The next morning, I got my answer. I was pouring myself a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Fugitive real estate mogul sought after failing to surrender. My stomach dropped. Ryan had run. There was a picture of him at the top of the article, grainy and taken from a distance. He was at an airport, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. The FBI was asking for the public's help in locating him. I sank into a chair, my hands shaking. Ryan was gone, and I had no idea where he was or what he might do next. But one thing was clear, the brother I once knew was gone, too. And I wasn't sure he was ever coming back. The days after Ryan disappeared were a blur of dread and uncertainty. The news covered his escape relentlessly, flashing his face across every screen, labeling him a fraud on the run. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Friends, family, even old coworkers I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out, asking if I knew anything. I ignored them all. What could I say? That I had been the one to tip off the FBI in the first place? That I was the reason my brother was running for his life. The guilt was suffocating, but there was something else that gnawed at me: fear. Ryan wasn't just running from the law. He was running from the truth, from consequences, from everything he'd spent years building. And I had no idea where he was or how far he'd go to protect himself. That changed one cold evening, about 2 weeks after he vanished. I came home to find a letter on my doorstep. No return address. Just my name scrawled on the front in Ryan's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. The message was short, but it made my blood run cold. "I know it was you." I stared at the words, my heart pounding. He knew. Somehow, Ryan knew I was the one who had turned him in. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Was he watching me? Was he planning something? For days, I lived in paranoia, jumping at every shadow, every sound. I even thought about going to the FBI myself, telling them everything, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I'd already betrayed Ryan once. I didn't know if I had the strength to do it again. But then the scandal took a turn I never saw coming. It started with another news alert. This time, it wasn't about Ryan, it was about my parents. I was in the middle of folding laundry when I saw the headline: "Parents of fugitive real estate mogul under investigation for fraudulent transfers." I froze. My parents? Fraud? None of it made sense. I clicked the article, and the details made my stomach churn. The FBI had discovered large sums of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, funneled into offshore accounts linked to my parents. The transfers had started years ago, around the same time Ryan's scams began, and the authorities believed the money was tied to his fraudulent activities. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the article. My parents had always been Ryan's biggest supporters, but this? Were they complicit? Did they know what he was doing all along? I called my mom immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Same with my dad. Panic set in as I tried to piece everything together. Were they hiding? Had they been arrested? The answer came later that night, in the form of a news report. My parents had been taken into custody for questioning. Footage showed them leaving their house in handcuffs, my mom crying, my dad stone-faced. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Family Fraud, Parents Accused of Laundering Son's Stolen Millions." It was like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My parents, the same people who'd raised me to believe in hard work and honesty, were now being accused of laundering Ryan's stolen money. And the worst part? I had no idea if they were guilty or not. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. If my parents had been involved, what did that mean for me? For our family? Did they know Ryan was guilty? Had they helped him hide the money, or were they just pawns in his scheme? The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. For a moment, I hesitated, but something told me to pick up. "Julie," a voice said. It was Ryan. I nearly dropped the phone. "Ryan? Where are you? What's going on? Do you know what's happening with Mom and Dad?" "I do," he said calmly, too calmly. "Because I made it happen." "What?" I whispered, my heart pounding. "They deserve this," he said, his voice cold and detached. "Mom and Dad. The FBI. Everyone. They all wanted to take me down, but I'm not going down alone." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "What are you talking about? You set them up." "They thought they were untouchable," he said, his tone almost smug. "They didn't even question it when I funneled the money through their accounts. They trusted me because I'm their son. Isn't that ironic? The people who raised me to believe in loyalty and family were so blind to what I was doing right under their noses." My head was spinning. "Ryan, do you have any idea what you've done? They could go to prison because of you." "They'll be fine," he said dismissively. They'll get lawyers. They'll figure it out. But I needed to buy myself some time, and this was the easiest way to do it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ryan wasn't just desperate, he was ruthless. He had sacrificed our parents to save himself, and he didn't even seem to care. "You're a monster," I whispered, my voice shaking. He laughed, a low, bitter sound. "No, Julie. I'm a survivor. You wouldn't understand." "Then why are you calling me?" I snapped. "Why are you telling me this?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Because I want you to know the truth. I want you to know that none of this would have happened if you hadn't turned me in." My breath caught in my throat. "Ryan. You started this, Julie," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "And now you get to live with it." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone, my hands shaking. The weight of everything crushed down on me: Ryan's crimes, my parents' arrest, the fact that I had set this entire chain of events in motion. The scandal didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged. Ryan's money trail led to other family members, cousins, uncles, even family friends, who had unknowingly helped him hide his stolen millions. The FBI uncovered shell companies, offshore accounts, and forged documents, all pointing back to Ryan's intricate web of lies. My parents were eventually released on bail, but their reputation was ruined. They refused to speak to me, blaming me for everything that had happened. To them, I was the reason their lives had fallen apart. And Ryan? He was never caught. Despite the FBI's best efforts, he disappeared without a trace, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. I still see his face sometimes, in my nightmares. I wonder if he's out there, living under a new name, starting over. I wonder if he thinks about me, about what he did to our family. But most of all, I wonder if I did the right thing. Because in the end, justice came at a cost I never could have imagined.